What's good, everybody? Josh Wright back again with a new video. Hope you guys are having a great day. And today we're going to be talking about the 90s. The 1990s, of course, very popular time in pop culture history. A lot of TV shows were really big in the 90s. A lot of movies, a lot of singers. Basically, like Seinfeld, Roseanne. Those are all big shows in the 90s. Movies like Jurassic Park, Green Mile. I'm trying to think. Space Jam. That was scary. Not Space Jam, but the way I did that was scary. Forrest Gump. All those movies. Jim Carrey, of course, he was pretty big in the 90s. Chris Farley was really big. Adam Sandler. All of them, they were all really big in the 90s. And you know what else was a big part of 90s pop culture? Sports. And that got me thinking, who is the real sports team of the 90s? Who is the team in the 90s? We got 4 candidates. If you guys enjoy this video, leave a like, subscribe. We're on the road to 200 subs. If your subscribe button is red like this cardinal flag behind me, by the way, that's new. Hope you guys like that flag. That flag was really, really cool. That means you're not subscribed, so go ahead, subscribe. So let's get started talking about team in the 90s. So obvious choices: the Bulls, the Atlanta Braves, the Cowboys in the early part of the 90s, and the Yankees in the late part of the 90s. So let's talk about the Bulls first. So the Bulls head coach was Phil Jackson, I believe. I'm not really huge into basketball, but of course I'm familiar with the Bulls from the 90s. I'm familiar with Michael Jordan. I'm familiar with Scottie Pippen. I'm familiar with Dennis Rodman. I'm familiar with most of... I'm familiar with the Chicago Bulls from the 1990s. Of course, I live in Illinois, and I'm friends with a lot of Bulls fans. I'm not a Bulls fan myself. I don't really watch a whole lot of basketball, mostly because St. Louis doesn't have a NBA team. Why'd you get rid of the Hawks? Seriously, we could have had 2 sports teams in St. Louis that were named after birds. You realize that? Shooing. Anyway. So, of course, the Bulls in the 90s, they were very popular. They won most of the NBA titles in the 90s, except for 94 and 95. I think those were won by the Rockets. And then I think they won most of them in the early 90s, and then up until 1998, I think, was when they had their last NBA title with Michael Jordan, if I'm correct. And then I think the Lakers started to get really good when Phil Jackson went over to the Lakers. They started to get really hot in the 2000s. But yeah, a lot of people tell me that the Bulls are the team in the 90s. I mean, they were a really good team. The Bulls in the 90s were phenomenal. And then you've got the Atlanta Braves, who are they were also nicknamed team in the 90s. The Braves, in my opinion, this might be a little bit biased because I'm more of a baseball fan than I am a basketball fan, but I will be honest, yeah, the Braves, I think they were a little more successful than the Bulls. So, the year 1990, the Braves were terrible in 1990. They were in last place. 1991, they go to the World Series along with the Twins. They play the Twins, who also finished last place in the previous year. Went to the World Series. Twins win, of course. And then the Braves, they won the National League pennants in 1991, 1992, 1995, as well as the World Series, 1996, and 1999. So they won 5 National League pennants, as well as the World Series in 1995. They also made it to the NLCS in 1983, 1997, and 1998, losing to the Phillies, Marlins, and Padres. Now, do I think the Braves are a pretty interesting candidate for team of the 90s? Absolutely. I mean, they had Bobby Cox, who is probably one of the greatest managers in baseball history. They had a lot of that pitching staff was phenomenal, led by Tom Glavine, Greg Maddux, John Smoltz. They had Andrew Jones, Chipper Jones. I think they had Andrus Galarraga for a little bit. I'm trying to think who else was Ron Gant. Was he on? He was on the Braves for a little bit. I think Brian Jordan was on the Braves for a little bit too. I think they're a pretty interesting candidate for team of the 90s, except for the thing is, during that playoff run, oh yeah, they expanded that playoff run until 2005. They only went to, out of all the World Series they went to, they only won one. So, I mean, the Braves are still great in the 90s, but I don't know if they're like the Bulls. And then we've got two interesting candidates. We got the Cowboys, who were pretty big in the early part of the 90s, and then we got the Yankees, who are big in the late part of the 90s. So let's talk about the Cowboys first. I actually did a video talking about what happened to the 90s Cowboys, because, of course, Troy Aikman, I think he was a rookie at the time. He was a stud of a QB when he first started. They ended up winning the Super Bowl against the Bills. I think they won one versus the Steelers. Had a huge rivalry with the Packers and the 49ers. The team that those 90s Cowboys were phenomenal. Again, I did a video talking about them before, so if you guys want to go ahead, check that out. And then, yeah. So the last team we got is the Yankees. So the Yankees, they were big in the late part of the 90s, starting off in 1995. The Yankees had a playoff run and as well, similar to the Braves, that lasted from 1995 to 2007. And then they went back to the playoffs. They missed the playoffs in 2008, and then they made it every year from 2009 to 2012. So the Yankees, of course, Joe Torre came over. He led the Yankees to 4 World Series titles in 96 against the Braves, 98 against the Padres, 99 against the Braves again, 2000 versus the Mets, and then they went back to the World Series again in 2001 and 2003, losing to the Diamondbacks in 2001 and 2003 to the Marlins. I think this is truly, I don't really think the Yankees are the team in the 90s. To me, I think if you're the team in the 90s, you got to be like the Bulls or the Braves. Like, be good throughout the entire 1990 decade. But the Yankees, they were pretty solid in the late part of the 90s. They won all those World Series. They had Derek Jeter, who was a rookie. They had Mariano Rivera, Bernie Williams, Scott Brosius, Jorge Posada. They had Paul O'Neill. I'm trying to think, who else did they have in the 90s? Who was, I don't know, but at the Yankees in the late part of the 90s, they were also really good. And then they also had some pretty good pitchers. I think they added Roger Clemens the later part of the 90s. But yeah, this is just a quick little video. Who do you guys think is the team in the 90s? Like, subscribe, comment down below. Options are the Braves, the Bulls, the Cowboys, or the Yankees. Who do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and talk to you guys.